Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Chipmunk here, ready to do the next video in my continuing series looking at every single movie ever nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. This time we are up to the 5th Annual Academy Awards, presented in 1932. The 5th Academy Awards ceremony was presented at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles in the Fiesta Room on November 18th, 1932, hosted once again by stalwart Conrad Nagel. For your trivia, items of note include Walt Disney's creation of a short subject specifically for the ceremony entitled Parade of the Award Nominees, Wallace Beery's and Frederick March's sharing the Best Actor award due to a tie, no films winning more than 2 Oscars, and the eventual Best Picture winner being one of very few over the years to be nominated without having the director likewise nominated. Also, Disney got a special recognition Oscar just for having created Mickey Mouse. The Best Picture nominees, previously separated into 2 categories, were now condensed into 1 for Outstanding Production, with 8 competitors total. As to those competitors, wowza, okay, this awards year was perhaps not a reversal, but it was a definite improvement on the year before. The 4th annual, that had some questionable choices that had me going, was that the best you got? These, however, are an embarrassment of riches. Right down the list. Here we go. Aerosmith, directed by John Ford, starring Ronald Colman and Helen Hayes. 108 minutes in total. The eternally personable Colman stars as the title doctor, who goes a professional journey culminating in his professional success, but also his losing everything he cares about personally, his wife, his mentor, etc. Both Colman and Hayes are quite good, and also Clarence Brooks in a supporting role, a black man treated with maturity and respect, lovely to see. Without them, though, this film really wouldn't have worked. It's a bit long, and there's nothing particularly distinctive about the cinematography or story. The parts with Myrna Loy as a potential rival for Aerosmith's affections add absolutely nothing and are kinda clunky. Ford has done much better films. Still, overall, this is not a bad entry, if only for those main performances. Colman is another one I would gladly watch read the phone book, and his and Hayes' acting here largely transcends the acting style of the time. Next up, Bad Girl, directed by Frank Borzage, starring James Dunn and Sally Ehlers. First off, yeah, the title is completely misleading, maybe just a way to get those butts into the seats. Ehlers is a stenographer girl who meets Dunn's radio shop clerk boy at Coney Island. She feels that all men just want one thing, and he feels that all women play games. She's sassy, he's grumpy, so naturally they've fallen in love by the end of the night. The basic story of the movie is them getting married and having a baby. And the conflict comes from the classic miscommunication, because, as in love as they are, they don't talk to each other as honestly as they should. And that can be so frustrating as a viewer. But other than that, I really enjoyed this one. Dunn and Ehlers have great chemistry and make an endearing couple. Particularly when they're apart, you can see their love for each other in their words and actions. And even with the miscommunication, there's a lot of honest talk in the film about people and how they approach life. There are also several parts where you think someone will have a certain reaction given the time, but they don't. And I have to say, I am loving these pre-code movies as they really took the opportunity given them to be more honest and forgiving about people's foibles. I.e., when Ellers' brother, with whom she lives, kicks her out of the apartment due to her coming back at 4 a.m. and his falsely assuming the worst of her, you think his girlfriend will take his side. Instead, she walks out with Ellers after giving her boyfriend a piece of her mind. This movie has not been remastered, and it has a few glitches. And as I said, the manufactured miscommunications can be kind of ridiculous from a viewer's perspective. But then again, it did win for Best Director and also adapted screenplay. This one is definitely worth your time. The Champ, directed by King Vidor, starring Wallace Beery and Jackie Cooper. 87 minutes. Okay, I'd heard of this one plenty, but never saw it, and dang it, King Vidor, if you didn't do it again! Beery is a washed-up boxer battling his alcoholism and gambling addictions in an attempt to get back in the spotlight, with the support of his young son Cooper. As Beery is also a single dad, predictably his son is also thrust into the roles of number one supporter and also nursemaid. Even with their financial problems and Beery's addictions, the two are devoted to each other, and it's incredibly touching. Another wonderful thing here is the inclusion of the boy's mother and stepfather, who come back into his life and prove to be wonderful people. They do want to raise Cooper and be there for him, so there's some conflict, but they don't fight Beery for him, and instead are incredibly understanding of the whole situation. This was so refreshing. It was a tear fest, particularly at the part where Beery hits rock bottom and attempts to push his son away from him for his own good. Oh boy, was somebody cutting onions then. This did win the awards for Best Original Story and also garnered a Best Actor for Wallace Beery, which was incredibly well-deserved. I never realized his range, and though he wasn't a character actor, like he didn't blend into parts necessarily, still, he had it. He had that range, and he deserves more credit than I ever gave him. 5-star final. Directed by Mervyn LeRoy. Starring Edward G. Robinson and Aileen McMahon. 89 minutes. If I hadn't seen most of these other movies, I would say this should have won. Robinson is the managing editor of a newspaper who learns a hard lesson as his pursuit of a certain story causes tragedy for all those involved. McMahon as his secretary remains his gal Friday despite it all, even as she feels they are both being dragged down by his actions. She was a beautiful woman but not a glamour girl, so she got resigned to character roles. Unfairly so, as her turn here is just wonderful. As for Robinson, I will say once more that he also was not a glamour puss by any means, so he got shuttled into supporting parts more and more as his career went on, but he is a marvelous actor and riveting as any other leading man. The acting largely is good here. There are some points where it is a bit stagey, which is par for the course given the time. But then the plot overall can be a bit of a soap opera at times, and it's still heavily affecting, particularly when the daughter of the couple affected by Robinson's story confronts him. And H.B. Warner of It's a Wonderful Life and other movies fame in a supporting part is supremely touching. Do highly recommend you find this one. The Smiling Lieutenant, directed by Ernst Lubitsch, starring Maurice Chevalier and Claudette Colbert. 89 minutes. Boy, did Chevalier have charm. Here he is the lieutenant of the title who strikes up a love match with Colbert's violin-playing sort of orchestra leader. But wow, did this not go where I was expecting. The princess of their small country, Miriam Hopkins, catches Chevalier's eye, and she thinks he is laughing at her, whereat, to get out of punishment, he explains that he was, enraptured by her beauty. Yeah, that's it. The princess is then likewise enraptured, and Chevalier ends up getting roped into marrying her, even though he doesn't think he's actually attracted to her, and the marriage goes, shall we say, unfulfilled for quite a while. Now, this does have a change for your man trope, which is a silly and tired trope, but here I will say it is done fairly well as it doesn't take itself too seriously. More than that, there are the two women actually befriending and supporting each other, which is absolutely delightful. As with previous Chevalier films, I don't find the songs particularly memorable, but they're the best I've heard from his stuff so far. Colbert had the longest and strongest career of all three leads, and it's neat to see how she played an early role as opposed to a later one, though she did them all well. This is a bubbly bit of charm nearly just as much now as it was then. 1 Hour with You, directed by Ernst Lubitsch, starring Maurice Chevalier and Jeanette MacDonald. 80 minutes, ironically. Like the last, a frothy Chevalier offering, with the Frenchman and MacDonald here being a married couple devoted to each other, until her likewise married, but unhappily, friend enters the mix. Interestingly, both films also have a younger Charlie Ruggles as a would-be Lothario. In the manner of many stories of the time, Chevalier's character does slip, but his wife forgives him because, I'm presuming, men will be men. But again, this film is reasonably clear what it's discussing when it comes to matters of adult relations, which leads me to understand where the Legion of Decency and all that was coming from with their ideas that films were not in line with their idea of, well, decency. I don't personally feel clearly alluding to sex as a bad thing when it's a big part of the story, but there wasn't any rating system at the time. The rating system itself is definitely a thing imperfect, but then there usually wasn't any clear way to tell if you were okay to bring your kids, or also if it was just something to avoid if you weren't comfortable with that sort of thing being discussed. So, yeah, the Hays Code definitely went too far, but now that I've seen a few of these pre-coders, I understand more from which it stems. As to the film, so far as sex-based comedic romps go, this is another charmer, particularly with the two leads, as MacDonald and Chevalier had great chemistry and made a great team. Shanghai Express, directed by Joseph von Sternberg, starring Marlene Dietrich and Clive Brooks. 80 minutes. The origin of the classic line, "It took more than one man to change my name to Shanghai Lily." Dietrich I'm not, so I'm not even going to attempt it. La Dietrich is in her element as the woman with not only a past but a present, as she bumps into Old Flame Brooks aboard the train of the title. We also meet several assorted characters, all taking the trip for different reasons, including Anna May Wong, one of the few minority actors of the time to carve out any sort of career in Hollywood. She is excellent here as, also, a woman with a past and present, a high-end prostitute to be exact, who Dietrich sticks up for and treats with respect. In fact, when it comes to racism, which at the time was largely overt, there is far less of it here than you might expect. The story has intrigue and suspense when the train is repeatedly waylaid by revolutionaries, and one of the passengers proves to be in on the plot. Clive Brooks is kind of more of a hunk of wood than a hunk, and I don't see what draws Dietrich's character to his exactly, but, to each of their own. Again, very pre-code, with there being definite references to extramarital sex, prostitution, and even rape, so if that is a trigger warning for you, skip this one. Some of the shots were breathtakingly beautiful. The men at night working and the steam around the train, chef's kiss. And the storyline holds up in many ways, plus is an interesting look at things leading toward the eventual communist revolution in China. There are what I consider cons. Among a few quibbles, we also have Warner Oland, a Swedish-American actor, once again portraying a, here half, Chinese man, which, nowadays it seems kind of like a weird white racist uncle who always shows up to family gatherings doing what he thinks is a funny shtick. Other than him portraying a different race, his acting is just fine, but, Like most of the rest on this list, though, this is a great film overall. Grand Hotel, directed by Edmund Goulding, starring John Barrymore and Greta Garbo. 112 minutes. The winner! The sort of movie that's epic while being self-contained. The action takes place entirely at the hotel of the title, and focuses on the visitors there over the course of a few days. Mainly we focus on Barrymore as a titled noble who has seen better times and now has resorted to gentleman thievery to make ends meet. I Want to Be Alone Garbo is a famous ballerina on the verge of a nervous breakdown, with whom he falls in love when he attempts to steal her necklace. Also, we have Joan Crawford as a stenographer, Wallace Beery, again, as a business magnate who hires her while attempting to run through a deal, then tries to bed her, and most notably, Lionel Barrymore. He plays an aging former accountant who happened to work for Beery's company, but now has been given a death sentence by his doctor, and is determined to use up his savings on the high life with the time he has left. He's so sweet and sympathetic, the sort you keep calling an absolute old dear and mean it. Everyone here is on point, although I must say I like Crawford here a little more than Garbo, and I don't say that lightly. But again, to each their own when it comes to preferences. I do like these sort of bottle stories with the different stories going on at once. That said, something about this didn't grab me like I feel it should have, despite the humanness of the characters and some really great shots. It's certainly the sort of film to win Best Picture, and I won't say it's not well deserved. If it were up to me, though, of these, it's hard to choose, but, The Champ. I think I'd go with The Champ. What do you think? Which of these have you seen? And if you happen to have seen all of them, which I recommend you do, which one would be your top choice? So that's it. Again, it's been another week, hasn't it? Oh boy. And it's going to be another week ahead, so let's keep going. I do recommend you keep going and hang in there and be kind to yourselves and each other. I'll see you next time. Bye now.